Hey, all right. If you stick with me on this, you're going to learn some remarkable things about the study of the cosmos and the study of scripture and how they intersect. And on top of that, I want to make a bold statement here as we prepare to discuss the significance and meaning of a total solar eclipse from a spiritual perspective. Um, I want to say very bluntly that God, the Creator, is speaking to us, and He's speaking something over our nation through this particular sign and some other things we'll get into. And you can actually be confident in understanding and taking in what He's saying. And I want to share a story with you, something that happened yesterday. And I am not sharing this to claim some divine revelation, although I believe God was speaking to me and guiding me to a much more solid source of inspiration and truth. And I'm just going to leave it to you to, discern and parse out what I'm saying. And I hope you do that. If you're watching this, if you're someone who listens to people talk about spiritual concepts, prophetic words, I hope that you take time to pause after you scroll past some crazy video about the end of the world. I hope that you are cultivating the practice of discernment, like pausing, asking God, is this of you? Do you feel peace on it? Do you feel truth? Do you feel grace on it? Anyway, not the point of this video, but I leave you with that. All right. So yesterday, I took my daughters to our local library, our town library, awesome place, and just to get out of the house. It was a day off, and get some books. Right. So we get there, and my oldest saw a movie that she wanted to get along with some books, and it was a movie called Mune, Mune, animated film from 10 years ago. And she really, really wanted this and had been thinking about. I don't know where she came across it or heard about it, but it was kind of an independently made movie. It wasn't that big. It wasn't like a Disney movie. Anyway, she wanted to get it, so we get it. We get some books, and the lady at the desk hands my girls both solar eclipse glasses because of the solar eclipse coming on April 8th. Now, if you're watching this video after the solar eclipse, this is still going to be very relevant for you. So they put on these solar glasses and they can't see anything. I don't know if you've ever put those on your eye, but if you look at anything, it's all dark. So they got very disappointed, like, what the heck? This is stupid. But I told them, no, you just got to wait. Just be patient. Those glasses will definitely come in handy next Monday when we see this thing. So, okay. Something happened out of all of this that just blew my mind later in the day. And I'm going to explain it all to you, break it down. But first, I want to drop some science knowledge here, okay? I'm going to link a video to a wonderful YouTube channel called Astrum that talks about eclipses and talks about why we have what's known as a total solar eclipse, where the moon completely blocks out the sun. And even if you watch the video, it shows you eclipses from other planets and what their moons look like. And in this video, they point this out. Now, this is not faith-based, nothing spiritual about it. I think it's an agnostic channel, maybe even full-out atheist. I don't know. But they say this. They say, by a bizarre but highly fortunate cosmic coincidence, our moon happens to be the right size and distance from us so that its angular distance is almost identical in size and shape to the angular diameter of the sun. Okay, if you didn't catch what that means, I'm going to read you another quote. This is from NASA. Okay, this is putting it a little simpler. This is NASA's website. NASA says, total eclipses are the result, listen to this again, of a cosmic coincidence. Even though the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, it happens to also be about 400 times farther away. That makes the sun and the moon appear almost exactly the same size in our sky. Here's the point. We are remarkably blessed to live on a planet where the moon just happens to be at just the right angle, just the right size away from the sun that it forms this total solar eclipse. Most of the other planets out there with moons, and there's trillions of them, do not have that experience. And the reason for this, I believe, goes back to a powerful verse in Genesis 1, actually, when God is creating the heavens and the earth. It talks about him putting the stars, the planet, everything in the sky, the greater light and the lesser light, the sun and the moon, for a bunch of purposes, one of which is to be a sign, a spiritual message of sorts. Okay, now there's lots of reasons that God has the universe set up the way it is. There's lots of physical, biological, cosmic reasons, but there's also spiritual reasons. He always does things on layers upon layers. There's so much depth to creation and how God works. So he's a scientist, he's an engineer, but he's also an artist. He's also a communicator, right? So there's layers of communication behind creation, and it's just insane the odds that our moon happens to be the size it is and the distance it is that we can experience this solar eclipse phenomena. And I was, thinking about the spiritual meaning of it a lot leading up to this eclipse. A lot of people are talking about it, and what are the signs? What are these things pointing to? And this is where I can give you something solid, something recorded in the ancient scriptures that's not my own personal opinion. I could tell you right now that the heavens of God are speaking something based on a beautiful psalm written by King David by the inspiration of God's Spirit. He said the heavens are declaring his glory. So the heavens are messaging the glory of God. Now, I could take you down some other roads of the ancient scriptures to tell you that the glory of God was most revealed in the coming of his son, Jesus. Jesus is the fullness of the glory of God. In fact, Hebrews tells us he's the radiance, just like light from the sun. He's the radiance of God himself. Now, okay, when we take that into consideration, there are signs in the heavens, and I'm not talking about astrology right now, where people will read so much into the heavens where they think they could kind of control their destiny or understand their future. I'm talking about messages that are declaring one primary thing. And that primary thing is the glory of Jesus, who he is and what he has done. And God, in his infinite wisdom and might, established this little rock floating around, a little bit of a bigger rock floating around the sun to declare a message to us. I believe when that sun in all of its shining glory goes dark, when you can't see the face of the sun, and for this moment, it's just black and darkness covers the face of the earth watching. And then slowly it begins to shift and the light begins to break free from that darkness. What is happening in that moment, ladies and gentlemen, is the gospel is being preached. And God in his infinite wisdom set up the clockwork of our solar system way, way, way in advance, so that this would be a message that would speak to his sons and daughters today, that there would be a prophetic artistry, an artistic message of the gospel, that Jesus, his light would be snuffed out. Jesus's light would be buried in a tomb. And for a moment, darkness would cover the earth. And yet, what happened? Jesus rose, the light broke forth, and he came out of that tomb. The glory of God came forth. And I believe that at the end of the day, solar eclipses are not harbingers of judgment. They are messages of the gospel of grace, that Jesus died for the brokenness of humanity, the darkness of humanity, and he rose to bring us new life and freedom and hope. So that's just first and foremost. And I'm going to continue now, though, with my story from yesterday because it's not over yet. Okay, there's more to this, and I do believe there's actually a prophetic message, even a layer underneath that for our country and for the world. So I'll get to that. Just stay with me a little bit longer. All right. I get home, and there's this show playing on the TV that has this character Omega on the show. And I just, you got to pay attention sometimes to these impressions that come to your heart. It's not always God, but sometimes God is whispering something. And I just felt impressed to look up the scriptures about Jesus being the Alpha and the Omega, right? I heard the word Omega. I just felt drawn to go to the Bible, open up the book of Revelation. The last book of the Bible has this phrase in it calling Jesus the Alpha and the Omega, right? So it's in the book of Revelation. It's in the first chapter and the last two chapters, and shows up, I think in chapter 2 as well. So it's bookended, Alpha and Omega, one in chapter 1 and 2 and 21, 22. That's cool. Anyway, I'm just going to read one part where John, the apostle who's receiving this revelation, it says he encounters Jesus shining like the sun. Okay, that sparked something in my heart when I saw that in the verse right before this. His face was like the sun shining in its strength. I had already been meditating on solar eclipses and all that kind of stuff, and so that kind of spoke to me. But I started reading, the next verse. It says, "When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man." So John just fell. And it says, "He placed his right hand on me, saying, 'Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. And I was dead, and behold, I am alive, and I have the keys of death and Hades.'" All right. So that phrase there, you might have caught it, the first and the last. That's how he's introduced earlier in the book as the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. He's repeating himself there. And the reason it goes with Alpha and Omega is that Alpha and Omega are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. Now, I had my another translation I was reading as well. When I was looking all this up, I had the Passion Translation with me. And in the Passion Translation, he actually uses the Hebrew in this. The Hebrew letters are the Aleph and the Tav. Those are the first letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And there's good reason to think that Jesus actually would have used the Hebrew when he communicated this to John, but it got translated as the Greek letters. I'm not going to argue about those details. That's not important. But just to give you some understanding, that's what it's talking about. Jesus is saying, I'm the beginning of creation itself. I'm the origin and source of all things, and I'm where everything is headed. And John is terrified, and yet Jesus puts a hand on his shoulder and says, "John, don't be afraid. Welcome to a new era of grace. I have overcome, and I have gone down to death itself, Hades, and I've taken the keys of it. I've taken hold of it. I've overcome darkness." And so when I think of a solar eclipse casting its shadow over the earth and then the sun reemerging in glory, I feel that same thing. And as it passes over the North American continent, I feel God is putting his hand on us as though even though we feel dead and hopeless, like John here, overwhelmed, that Jesus is saying, don't be afraid. Behold, I was the one who went dark in the grave. I died, and yet now I live forevermore, standing in victory, declaring my righteousness, my grace, and mercy over humanity, right? Okay, so I'm reading all this. I'm just getting so blessed, just meditating on this stuff. And then I open up Facebook. I'm scrolling, you know how we do, scrolling. And I come across a post about the eclipse that somebody had. And there's a lot of stuff out there about the eclipse. It's not weird that it showed up on my Facebook feed. I'm not saying that was like a crazy coincidence because people are talking about this right now. But it was interesting because the one that did show up on my feed was about the shape of the eclipse. If you put this eclipse with the last two over America, the shadows, as it goes across the continent and across the country within the continent, it forms the shape of the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, and it's pointing that out. It's pointing out this Aleph and Tav, or the Alpha and the Omega, in this post, which I saw after I felt drawn to go to the Bible because I heard Omega on some random TV show. So anyway, my wheels are kind of turning. I'm like, what's going on here? If just to explain this a little bit more, how the letters formed, we have these three big eclipses that have happened over the last 7 years. So it was a long time before the previous one after that. So we're kind of in this 7-year cycle of getting these three big eclipses. And 2017 was the first one in this 7-year cycle. And then there was another one in 2023. And now we're getting the last one. And when they all cross over, they form what looks like a letter A, but even more in depth, it looks exactly like the A in the Hebrew alphabet. And so anyway, I keep reading the post, and I saw other stuff that I had seen before. There's a lot of fear and judgment out there. And a lot of people are talking about Nineveh. There's all this stuff about how the eclipse is going to pass over all these towns in America that happen to be named Nineveh. Okay, now I haven't fact checked that one. I did hear someone else say they fact checked it, and some of those Nineveh towns aren't in the actual radius, like if you look at it yourself. So again, you got to use discernment on the internet these days more than ever before. Okay, I don't just take in whatever I read. Those days are long gone. So I don't know. There's definitely some towns named Nineveh in its trajectory, but these posts that are coming out about Nineveh, of course, are about the story of Jonah. If you're not familiar, the city of Nineveh was going to face destruction unless they turned to God and left behind their violence. That was like the main thing. There was violence and injustice in the land. They had to turn back to a place of peace. And Jonah was the prophet, who got swallowed by the whale, who was called to go to them. And I find it very ironic that people are talking about this story, and there's all of this anger about America and the path we're going down, and that we're headed towards judgment. And I have to laugh because, and bear with me on my, it's not a mocking laughter. It's just like an ironic laughter, because Jonah, he was such an angry religious person. He was. If you've read the story, actually the whole thing is about someone who he doesn't have a grid for God's goodness. Jonah, do you know why he was running? If you know the story, Jonah was running away from God, and he got swallowed by a whale, right? 3 days, 3 nights in the belly of a whale. Jonah was upset that God was going to show mercy. He knew God was about to show mercy to Nineveh. And he knew if he just even preached a little bit, just the littlest bit, God would use to transform Nineveh. Nineveh was an enemy of Israel. This is like God coming to an Israelite today and saying, hey, I'm sending you to your neighbors over there in the West Bank. I'm sending you to your neighbors in the Jordan or wherever, and I want you to go and release my mercy and my blessing over them. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Let me try to make it more personal. This is like God coming to someone who's really poor, or someone who's middle class, struggling every day to pay their bills. And God shows up to this person and says, hey, Joseph, Michael, Timmy, I want you to go to Wall Street. I want you to go and speak to the bankers in Wall Street and the executives, and I want you to tell them I'm about to pour out my mercy and goodness on them if they will turn their hearts to me. If they will just hear your word, I will provide the power of my spirit to convict their heart. You just go, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to pour, and this was like an enemy. Like, what? These are the people that are causing the problems of our nation in the first place, God. This is Jonah talking. Like, why would I do that? And God has to send the whale, and finally he goes, and then he's still upset. He goes and the 4th chapter of Jonah is hilarious because he's waiting for God to still destroy the nation, and it doesn't happen, and he gets angry about it because he's got so much religious bitterness in his heart. And let me tell you something, man. There is a lot of judgmental, bitter, fear-based Christianity out there. And you got people that are looking for signs all the time. They're looking for signs of the times, end times. And you know what Jesus said about those looking for signs? He called them a wicked generation. A wicked generation looks for signs, but only one sign will be given to it. You know what that sign is? He says it's the sign of Jonah, who was in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, and so shall the Son of Man be crucified. He will be buried. He'll be covered in darkness, but he will arise on the third day. Every sign, every wonder in heaven and on earth and under the earth is all meant to point to the gospel of Jesus, the good news of God's mercy, and that it's his kindness that leads us to what? If you know that one, repentance, a change of mind, a change of perspective, an awakening of identity. And so, anyway, I think there's a little bit of this going on where God is calling us to understand his grace for the nation. And I believe he's speaking that grace and he's calling us to the gospel. That's what these signs are meant to point to. Okay, so after all of that happens, right? The library, the glasses, this movie my daughter wanted to rent, right? I go home, I go on this little bunny trail with Omega, Alpha and Omega, the Facebook post. Okay, all of that happens. We're getting ready. The night's winding down and she wants to watch the movie. And I didn't think we were going to watch it, but Kelly wanted to do it, wanted to watch the movie. And so I was like, all right, let's watch this movie, Mune. So we put on this movie, Mune, and it's about the guardian of the moon. In the story, there's a guardian of the sun and a guardian of the moon, and together they have to protect the sun and the moon in this kind of fantasy world. And in the story, the sun gets stolen and it turns dark. And I'm watching this, okay? After all this stuff happened yesterday, I'm watching this. And I'm just like, God is really speaking today about this. So just to clarify, God speaks. God gives signs and wonders. He gives prophecies. Like, this is all still part of the Christian journey and inheritance. You can hear God. The key is understanding that all of these signs and wonders and prophecies are meant to point to the glory of Jesus and what he did in his death and resurrection, right? If you had that as your center, then you could properly discern what God is speaking through different things. Anyway, I just knew God was speaking. I'm watching this movie after all this where the sun gets turned to darkness and there's this guardian of the moon, right? And this is what happens in one part of the story. There is this evil being who used to actually be a good guardian who turns dark, and he's almost like this he's almost like this demonic figure, but you find out that there was these wicked snakes that deceived him. Snakes deceived him, right? This is some, just secular animated movie, but it's picking up on the larger story. So this character named Mune, M-U-N-E, who gets chosen by a lamb. I'm not kidding. All this stuff was in the movie. This unseeming hero gets chosen, and he has to go into the underworld to face this being who's stolen the sun. And he goes and he ends up taking the snakes out of his heart, these white lying snakes. He gets them out of his heart, and this being ends up he was like this lava monster thing, and the lava turns into a waterfall. And in the movie, they say that Mune is the chosen one who quenched the fires of the underworld. He went into the underworld, into Hades, and quenched its flame and redeemed the sun. And I'm watching this and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the work of Christ. What he said to John, do not be afraid, John. I am the first and the last, the living one. I was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Listen, I want to introduce you to some good news. Jesus Christ is risen. He's alive, and he has defeated death. He's defeated wickedness. He's brought mercy and forgiveness to all mankind. God is pleased with mankind, according to the angels who sang out at Christ's birth. God is in a good mood. A much better mood than the religious people on your Facebook feed. Much better mood. So one last thing here about the glasses. You remember the solar glasses? My daughter put on the solar glasses. She was disappointed because she couldn't see anything. Well, I want to let you know that there is this journey of faith that needs to cover your eyes, and you will have to push through disappointment at times, right? Because you don't see it. Like, okay, Nick, there's this great news. Jesus overcame death, the grave. Okay, I still see all this suffering. I still see these evil people at Wall Street pulling strings. I still see other problems in New York and in the Middle East. Like, how is this good news? I'm telling you, you got to learn to put on those solar glasses, Jesus glasses, and behold the risen Son who reigns over all of it. Okay? It's faith. There's something about faith that's like so vital to the development of the human soul. We don't understand it all right now. But it's like my other daughter, my youngest, who's 2, and trying to get her to eat vegetables and telling her, like, look, I know you don't understand why we're shoving this green, gross stuff into your mouth. Like, I know it feels like we're doing something mean to you here, but it's good for you. You can't understand nutrients and biology right now, but you have to trust mommy and daddy. Okay, this is good for you. All right, there's something about faith. You don't understand it all. Like, why do I have to have faith? Why do I have to see it with the eyes of my heart? Why can't I use my real eyes? Like, God, just show up. Just show up in some crazy way that prove it. Give us a sign that shows everyone you're alive. Like, why do I have to wear these glasses of faith? Well, sweetie, it's just good for you. You will understand in eternity, you will see why this was so important to develop faith and trust in your soul. All right? I pray for a surge of faith to fill your heart and a greater awakening to the gospel. And I want to leave you with one quick word of hope for America. All right? I do believe there's a layer of propheticness to America right now and to what God is saying. I will say that I do feel like there is some temporary darkness coming to America. Quite literally, like our power going out. That this is a year of seeing stuff shaking in our electrical grid and our internet capabilities. Okay? But I believe that it's only going to be temporary. And actually, God is going to use all the chaos of the election season and the chaos of cyber attacks or whatever it is. He's going to use it all to bring an awakening to this modern day Nineveh state that we're in. He is getting ready to pour out incredible grace and mercy on our nation. And I was blown away. One last thing I'll leave you with. I was blown away by the fact that these eclipses are this 7 years journey of these eclipses forming the Aleph symbol over America. I was blown away by the fact that it started in 2017 because Dylan and me, we did a whole message on Elisha's Riddle on our podcast on this 7-year word from starting in 2017 and this beautiful shift happening in 2024. We'll leave that in the link as well. It's episode 11 of our podcast. But in a nutshell, it's about this beautiful church rising, shining with the light of Jesus that we're going to see like never before. And I want to leave you with hope and a message of clarity that Jesus is risen. That is the number one sign you have to worry about, is the sign of the cross and the resurrection. Jesus is alive, he's victorious, and he has great plans for our nation. Even if there's crisis, even if there's a period of darkness, even literally in America this year, it's going to produce incredible fruit as people will turn to the one who is their Alpha, their source, their origin, their home. And let's be messengers of that gospel. Let's call people home. All right. Love you all. Thanks for listening.